In today's video, we're going to talk about something that surveyors don't talk about very often. In fact, I don't hear it talked about hardly ever, but it's really important. And so that's why I wanted to talk about it in the video. And it has to do with the last phase of a land title survey or an ALTA survey, and the fact that that is actually a negotiation between the land surveyor and the other parties in the transaction. And I don't think a lot of surveyors understand that, and I don't think a lot of people that are in the real estate professions that deal with ALTA surveys understand that either. And so it's important for everybody involved to understand that the last phase of an ALTA survey is a negotiation. And it's important to understand who's negotiating and what they're negotiating over. So if you have that understanding, you will be less surprised in the last phase of an ALTA survey, especially if something goes a little bit sideways. You will be less surprised, and you will also be able to understand the risk that the different parties are trying to manage, and it may make it easier for you to resolve conflicts or impasses and close deals, which is what everybody involved in a real estate transaction ultimately wants to have happen. So in this video, I'm going to give you a quick overview of what is an ALTA survey. We're going to talk about what the last phase of an ALTA survey is, what I call the last phase, and then we're going to talk about who's negotiating. You know, as a land surveyor, who am I negotiating with during that last phase of an ALTA survey? And then the last thing, number 4, we'll talk about what am I negotiating about? What are we? I don't want to say fighting, because that's got a pretty negative connotation, but what are we negotiating over, or what are we arguing over? Sometimes it becomes an argument. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. I'm not going to spend a ton of time explaining what ALTA surveys are. I have some other videos on our RH Learning channel you can check out if you don't know what an ALTA survey is. It's a special type of boundary survey that we do as land surveyors. The specific purpose is to remove the survey exception from title insurance coverage. It's almost always required by a lender and the land title company. So the bank doesn't want to make a loan to fund the purchase of the property unless the survey exception is removed from the title insurance coverage. The title insurance company won't remove that exception without a current ALTA survey. We have a specification, it's very detailed, that we need to follow as land surveyors if we're going to perform an ALTA survey. Okay, so second point, what is the last phase of an ALTA survey? Okay, so the last phase of an ALTA survey starts when I submit my preliminary surveyor to the lender and the land title insurance company for review. And that's typically, that event is typically the deadline that we have to meet. And so when we tell a client we will perform an ALTA survey in 5 days or 10 days or 15 days, that clock, the 10-day clock, we most typically do 10 days. The 10-day clock, that deadline at the end of that 10-day clock is submittal of the survey for review. We structure it that way because I don't have control over how long it's going to take for the bank and the title company to review the survey. So that's the deadline that I can control. So the last phase of an ALTA survey starts when I send in a 95% complete preliminary survey for the lender and the title company to review. And then what typically happens is there is some back and forth. So the lender and the title insurance company or their attorneys will review the survey. They will send comments back to my team. We will review those comments, make changes if we feel like we can do that based on the comments. We will resend the revised survey, and then it gets reviewed again by the lender and the title insurance company. Sometimes the buyer and the seller also are looking at it. Just depends on the transaction and how sophisticated the players are. There's usually more than one round of this. There's usually almost always at least 2 rounds, and there could be 5 or 6 rounds. I don't know if I've ever done, I've done a lot of ALTA surveys. I don't know how many I've done where there hasn't been at least 2 rounds, maybe a couple in 20 years. So this process takes a few days, and there's some back and forth. And the cycle ends when the parties to the transaction have come to a consensus that the survey is acceptable, and I sign and seal it. So that's when the last phase ends. I deliver the signed and sealed survey. So the third thing we wanted to talk about, the third point, was who am I negotiating with during that last phase? Primarily, I'm negotiating with the land title company. Now, I may be getting input from the bank or from the real estate broker or from the buyer's attorney or the seller's attorney, but primarily the negotiation is with the land title insurance company. Why? Why of all the parties involved in the transaction, why am I negotiating with the land title insurance company? It's a pretty simple reason. The land title insurance company and the land surveyor are taking on the bulk of the risk in the transaction, at least the risk related to boundary issues in land title. So the bank is not going to lend the money unless there's an insurance policy backing the title to the parcel. And the title insurance company isn't going to issue the insurance unless they've got a surveyor on the hook for items that could be disclosed by a proper survey. So if you think about that for a minute, the land title company, you got to remember, they're an insurance company. They have an incentive to push as much of the risk on to me, the surveyor, as they can, as I will allow. And I, as a surveyor, have an incentive to push as much of my risk back on the title insurance company as they will allow. Now, that sounds like a WWF cage match, right? Okay, but in reality, most title companies are pretty reasonable. Most surveyors are pretty reasonable. And you spend the last few days coming to some agreement on how that risk is going to get allocated between the title insurance company and the land surveyor. So what are we negotiating? How does that risk get allocated? Typically, we are negotiating two things. We're negotiating the content and format of the notes that appear on the survey, and not as much, but occasionally we will also negotiate the elements that are shown on the actual map, the map of the survey itself. But primarily, we're negotiating the content of the notes. Now, a good ALTA survey will have notes from the surveyor. So one of the first things I look for when I review someone else's ALTA survey is, do they have any notes? Because if they don't have notes, that tells me they probably either A, didn't know what they were doing, or B, didn't do a good job. So a good surveyor is going to put notes on the ALTA survey. That set of notes that are going to disclose important information, facts about the property to the title insurance company and the lender. So now, I think a lot of times people don't read those notes, but everybody should read them. Everybody involved in the transaction, they are important. They're one of the tools that I use as a land surveyor to communicate potential issues or risks to the other parties in the transaction. So what kind of notes am I talking about? So I just got a couple examples here. I might give you a note about how the building footprints were derived. I might give you a note about a potential junior-senior rights issue that might require review of a chain of title to resolve. I might put a note on there that says I wasn't provided evidence of any appurtenant easements. Those are easements that serve the subject parcel, especially if it's like a landlocked parcel and there's a driveway or other utility easements. I'm going to put a note on there about that. I might note evidence of encroachments or use of the property by others, potentially without permission. So those are all the kinds of notes that I'm going to put on a survey. Now, a sneaky surveyor will try and put notes on the survey that push risk onto the title insurance company that really belongs with them. And so you don't want to let your surveyor do that. Okay, but so for example, let me give you an example. So a lot of surveyors will do what we call two monument tango. They go out, they find a couple centerline monuments in the road, and then they calculate the boundary based on that, but they don't go look for monuments at all the other property corners as they should. And so a surveyor might put a note on there that says, centerline monuments in Blake Avenue held to establish boundary, monuments at other corners of the subject parcel not searched for. Like, yeah, the surveyor, she doesn't get to do that. That's not acceptable, right? The spec says you got to go look for those monuments. So that kind of note shouldn't be allowed on the survey. Okay, so why, this is boring, why should you care? Well, if you're involved in a commercial real estate transaction, you want this to close. You want the deal to close. You want to be able to get the title company and the land surveyor to agree on the final content and form of the map. So if the land title company, insurance company feels like there's too much risk, they're not going to insure. If they won't insure, the bank won't fund the loan. The deal doesn't close. Man, everybody gets unhappy when the deal doesn't close, right? A lot of unhappy people. Now, what that means sometimes is, as a land surveyor, I get put under intense pressure to modify my map to make the title insurance company happy. And I try and be reasonable, but I can't always do that. I am not going to expose myself to unreasonable risk just so you can close your deal. If there's, for example, an encroachment on the property or a problem in the vesting grant deed, I'm not going to paper that over or lie about it. I can work with you to get it fixed, but I'm not going to lie about it. And so if the surveyor caves to pressure to modify the notes on the map to hide a problem, everybody loses there. What's really happening there is the lender is being exposed to unnecessary risk, because most of the time your surveyor has a pretty limited insurance policy. And if there's a major problem, boundary or land title problem with a transaction, your surveyor is probably not going to be able to make the lender whole. The insurance policy the surveyor has, there's not enough coverage. And so even though the surveyor can lie and paper over a problem and everybody's happy right now because the deal closes, ultimately the bank shouldn't allow that, because the bank's the one that's taking on the risk. So part of being a good surveyor is telling everybody, I know people are upset about this. This means the deal might not close, but there's a problem here and I can't paper over it or lie about it on my survey. So you got to be ready to do that. Okay, so in conclusion, don't be surprised. The last phase of an ALTA survey is negotiation between the land surveyor and the land title insurance company. There's going to be some back and forth. Sometimes the surveyor will find a problem that can't be fixed, and that means, or can't be fixed immediately, and that means that the deal's not going to close. And people are going to be unhappy about that. It happens. Doesn't happen all the time. I would say 1 out of 10, maybe 1 out of 5 ALTA surveys, I find a pretty major problem. That's why banks make you get ALTA surveys before they fund the loan. So hire a good surveyor and be prepared for the surveyor to maybe find something that has to be shown on the survey that people aren't going to be happy about. And then one last thing that I'll mention, and I might talk about this in another video, is, sometimes you have to be ready to switch title insurance companies. If the surveyor finds a problem and it can't be immediately solved and the title insurance company doesn't want to insure, sometimes a different title company will be willing to take on that risk depending on the kind of risk it is. So sometimes as a buyer, you've got to engage with a different title company to get the deal insured and to get the loan funded. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it was a little bit of a dry topic. I hope it helped. If you have questions about an ALTA survey or you need help with an ALTA survey, you are welcome to reach out to my team at Redefine Horizons, and we'll see what we can do.